All right, well, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. My name is Nicole Zervos, and I am Associate Director of Admissions at Clark. And so tonight we are continuing our Clarktoberfest series, and we're going to be talking about clubs and organizations. And so tonight I'm joined by a few students and colleague of mine, and we're just going to talk all about different clubs and organizations at Clark, ways to get involved, and how to find those opportunities on campus. So we're just going to start off by having the panelists introduce themselves. So Allie, would you go first?
Hi, my name is Allie Schilling. I'm the Director of Campus Life for Student Leadership and Programming. I use she, her pronouns, and I have been at Clark for just over 4 years. This semester, we have been working hard getting student engagement to be as active at it as it is, and of course with COVID, it's a challenge, but I think that we are doing a good job, and some of the students can kind of attest to the safety and the activities that are going on campus. I am looking forward to answering your questions and talking to Nicole and the students, and really happy I could be a part of this.
Great, thank you. Kate, can you go next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Kate. I am now a junior, which is crazy. I'm from Newton, Massachusetts, so about 40 minutes away. I study environmental science, political science, and geography. Outside of the classroom, I like to keep myself pretty busy. I am a member of our varsity women's rowing team. I also am the co-president of our Model United Nations team. We ranked 15th in North America this past year, so I always like to put that out there. And then I also am a part of some other clubs along the way. So I am a member of our Latin American Student Organization, March for Our Lives, the Clark Student Sustainability Fund Council, as well as NARAL. So I'm pretty busy. If you guys have any questions about those clubs in particular, feel free to ask.
Great, thank you. And Luke?
Hello, everyone. My name is Luke Pound. I'm a junior, pronouns are he, him, and I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I am studying psychology with minors in political science and comparative literature. I do a lot of individual research in psychology, as well as some research within some of the psychology labs. But as far as extracurriculars go, I'm very interested in the arts. I am the co-captain of Clark's salsa team, Salsa and Sandita, and I also work very closely with a lot of the other dance teams with events and planning. I'm also an actor and a playwright for a lot of Clark's theater organizations. I'm currently in Clark University Players Society's production of Macbeth, which will be a walking production in the local Arboretum. I've also participated in Clark Musical Theater Productions, and I have also written plays for Clark University Players Society and the theater department. I am also involved with singing. I am a member of Clark University Concert Choir, as well as a former member of the Chamber Choir. So if you have any questions about how the arts work on campus, feel free to ask.
Great, thank you, everyone. So before we officially get started, I do want to just talk a little bit about how to use some of the technology, which some of you have already started doing, which is great. So if you have a question for one of our panelists, if you'd like to learn more about their activities, or just have a question for them about their experience at Clark, please use the Q&A feature. So depending on how you have your computer set up, it may be at the bottom or the top of your screen, but you'll see a Q&A box. Please put your questions in there for the panelists. If you're having any technology issues, if you can't see or hear us for any reason, please put that in the chat and we'll try to troubleshoot that for you as well. So we just did some quick intros and met the panelists. So thank you guys for introducing yourselves and giving us a little bit of background on what you do at Clark. I do just want to talk briefly about going kind of over some general information about clubs and organizations, and then I'll have Allie and the students kind of give you a little bit more in-depth information. But At Clark, we do offer over 130 student clubs and organizations. I think for a school of our size, we definitely offer a lot of opportunities and a lot of clubs for students to get involved in. We don't have Greek life at Clark, so if you're looking for a school that has fraternities and sororities, Clark unfortunately does not have any of those, but I do think that there are tons of ways to still get involved, meet people, and make friends, and get that experience of really having the community through those clubs and organizations. And ways that students find those clubs and organizations is through Club and Organization Fair that's put on every year for students to get involved. And there are lots of leadership opportunities within certain clubs, organizations on campus. I definitely think Clark students tend to be very active. You'll find that Clarkies are definitely doers. They like to get involved and kind of take charge, and are very passionate about the clubs, organizations, and what they do at Clark and in the community. So I'll kind of go on from there. And I think it's also important to know that there are tons of different types of clubs that you can get involved in. So if you're looking for something specific, we have everything from academic and professional to lots of arts and performance groups, community service, culture and diversity, leadership and governance, politics and activism, publications and media, religion and spirituality, and different special interest groups. So if there's something that you're looking for, we probably have it. We also have the opportunity to start your own club or organization, which I'll have the students talk about a little bit as well. But Allie, I want to turn it over to you for a minute. Do you want to talk a little bit more about your office and your role at Clark and kind of how you help students find these opportunities and talk about how they can get involved?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. I think you did a really good job of kind of an overview of the types of clubs and organizations that we have at Clark. As Kate and Luke talk a little bit more about the specific clubs that they're involved in, you'll see that they fit into many of the categories that are listed on the screen right now. Our programming and engagement efforts at Clark are robust. We have small scale events, we have large scale events, we have meetings, and we often see clubs create events / meetings that are either unexpectedly popular or that they knew a lot of students are going to attend, and so we plan for that. And those can be anything from music on the green to open mic nights, as well as celebrating a lot of cultural holidays and just getting together and connecting with each other. Like I said a little bit earlier, this semester has posed challenges, definitely. But the clubs, I've been very, very impressed with the creativity that all of the students have really put in, and the thought that has gone into many of their clubs, meetings, and events. We have a platform at Clark called Clark Engage, and with a Clark username and password, you can log in and see everything that all of the other clubs and organizations are planning. A lot of offices have pages on Clark Engage, and that really acts as a student engagement calendar. And so that is how a lot of the student clubs and organizations reserve space and really advertise the meetings and events and gatherings, I should say, that they are doing. My staff works hard to meet with as many clubs as possible. And so we often have a lot of one-on-one meetings, a lot of group meetings. I know Luke, I just met with Luke a couple of days ago with all of the performance groups and really talking about how to be safe in this COVID semester and still being able to practice dance indoors and outdoors and what that looks like. And so there's a lot of support, I would say, from student leadership and programming, as well as a lot of creative ideas for students. Let's see what else is on my notes. In addition to clubs and organizations, there are leadership opportunities at Clark. The main leadership opportunity is to become a leader of a club or organization, but there's other leadership summits and leadership workshops that we create as well. One of them being the Emerging Leaders Institute, primarily for first and second year students. That is currently being planned for either over intersession or spring semester, and is a class of about 8 weeks or so of students who are wanting to dive deep into their leadership qualities and the skills that they can build as they go through at Clark as students. The last thing I will talk about is, although we have 130 clubs, there are opportunities for you to start your own club. We have paperwork to fill out, and it's pretty simple to find a group of students who have the same interests that you have, and create community around that. We will try to connect you with as many clubs as possible and as many students, but if you find that there is not a club for a specific interest, we can definitely help you find that group of students who have that same interest and make your idea a reality. And so I just want to urge you that if you don't see a specific club or organization, it doesn't mean that not in the process of being created, or and it doesn't mean that you can never have that club. And so that is just a few of the little tidbits that I have, and I'm happy to answer questions as we go along.
Great, thank you. That was great information, and I think really important for students to know about the ways that they can get involved, and they can start their own club. And I think the leadership opportunities are really great at Clark as well. I think a lot of Clark students are really seeking out those opportunities to kind of test their leadership skills in both clubs and organizations and in formal ways as well. So that's really great. So Kate and Luke, I'm going to ask you a few questions just before we kind of move into the audience questions. If you could both think back to your first year at Clark and starting off in your first year, how did you go about learning about clubs or organizations, or deciding which ones you wanted to get involved in? What was that process like for both of you?
Yeah, so I think going into college, I definitely knew I wanted to do Model UN. It was actually a very big pull to come to Clark in the first place because I was doing it in high school and heard about how well our team was doing at the time. So I already knew I wanted to be a part of that, and then I had other interests, but a lot of the clubs that I joined came from the club fair that we have in the fall. Usually in a typical semester, I know everything's a little different right now, but usually on the green in the center of campus, we'll have a huge event where all of the clubs come out and have a table that they decorate and they play music, and they basically sell you their club or organization. And it's a great way to just browse all the options, sign up for all of the email lists that you'll be on for forever, and get involved through that. So I signed up for probably like 50 clubs that day. And then whichever meetings I could make for the general interest meetings, I would go to. And I kind of went from there. So I think that that was a really good stepping stone. And I know that this year, in place of that, we had a weekend event for the club fair, and different clubs could sign up for different slots during the weekend to have virtual like general interest meetings. So that was kind of like the alternative route we went this semester. But usually the club fair is definitely where I suggest looking for different places to be involved.
Yeah, for me, similar to Kate, there was a particular extracurricular that drew me to Clark, which was an event hosted by the Clark University Players Society and the theater department, known as Playfest, or the Nude Play Festival. This happens every other year in the fall, and 5 or 6 student playwrights submit plays, and those plays are performed over 3 weeks. In every other fall, as I mentioned, but I was very interested in writing plays, so that was one particular draw, was the theater department. Though when you do performing arts, of course one must audition and not get in an audition and keep on auditioning for a lot of groups. So when I initially came to Clark, I just auditioned for tons of groups that I saw like advertised at the club fair or that I had previously heard of. I did not get into all of them, but as I auditioned for these groups, I did make friends with other people that were auditioning, other people that were leading these groups. And after auditioning for all the a cappella groups, a lot of the members of those groups said, hey, why don't you check out chamber choir? This seems like something you'd be really interested in. And then I ended up auditioning for that group and going along with them on their Ireland tour the following summer. So definitely the club fair is a really good catalyst for figuring out some things you might want to do, but definitely look and see if there are any groups that you might be interested in beforehand. And also as you talk with other people, as you get deeper into your major or your interests academically, you'll meet people that might also suggest organizations you might be interested in.
Great, thank you. And it looks like we have a good number of questions from the audience. So I'm going to sort of dive into some of those for you guys. So we have one question about service opportunities on campus. So what kind of service opportunities do we have at Clark? Can students work within the community and policy in Worcester?
I can start. We do have a handful of service-based clubs on campus. A few that come to mind is Main Idea. That club primarily works in the arts, the Worcester arts community, and works with youth. We have ACOG, which is all kinds of girls and works with youth in Maine South. The other clubs on campus work very closely with the community engagement office at Clark and either have to do with volunteering or working with organizations that are nonprofits in Worcester. Something that's important to note is that if a club isn't listed under community service, it doesn't mean that there isn't community service opportunities within that club. Many clubs work with nonprofits and bring speakers in and work in a sense to volunteer for a club or raise money for a club, volunteer or raise money for an organization in Worcester that they find passion in, right? And so there are community service clubs listed on Clark Engage, but a lot of our clubs work within the community and they find their special interests, I guess, within Worcester and within specifically the Maine South community. And I'll say just one more thing. An area of the community that I don't think people would consider this community service, but it's really neat the amount of clubs who want to give business to local restaurants. We have a lot of cultural restaurants within Maine South that have really delicious food, and our clubs get to know those people who own those restaurants. And especially during this time, our clubs have really stepped up and wanted to patron, I guess, that those restaurants. And so that is a form of community service. I think that is pretty unique and pretty cool that our clubs step up and try to serve the restaurants and I guess eat out from them as much as possible.
Great, thank you. We have another question about, someone wants to know a little bit more about Kate's Model UN experience. Would you mind talking a little bit more about that, Kate?
I could talk about Model UN all day if you wanted me to, but I'll try and keep it short. So basically, Clark's Model UN team, as I said, ranked 15th this year. In past years, we ranked 13th to 18th, I would say. That's probably our range of all the schools in North America, which is pretty impressive. But basically, our team is also half a credit, so you can take it as a half a credit course. We meet Tuesdays 6 to 9, and we have 2 people that run it. So myself and this girl named Valeria. And basically we run class and we do a bunch of different exercises that helps us in competition. And then we practice diplomatic procedures and speech giving and writing and all of this stuff. And then we will attend conferences, usually during a semester. This semester, a lot of the conferences got moved to the spring. But basically we travel with our budget, so it's completely free for students, and we go to different locations around the United States as well as Canada, which is really fun. We go down to DC for conferences, to Chicago, to New York City, to Boston, to Montreal. And then depending on the year, sometimes we'll go to different locations. So it's been really, really fun. It's a great way to make a network. And the team is really close, and it's a lot of fun right now. We usually on an average semester have about 50 active members. And the majority of those students are going to conferences. We also host a high school conference. So if you want to learn how to run an event that big, we have a high school conference, which usually is around 300 students that come to it. And then we also have a middle school conference in the spring that we run, which is around the same size. So if you're looking for a more administrative role in Model UN, we also have that. And the money that we raise from that goes to funding our spots at more conferences. So it's been really fun. It's one of my favorite parts of Clark.
Great, thank you. I know there are a lot of prospective students who are interested in Model UN, so that's great that they can hear a little bit more about that. Another question that's come in is, what music opportunities are there for string players?
I was going to say Luke.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say you should take that one.
Oh.
I can talk in general about music clubs, but I think you would know more about the specifics.
Yeah, I know at least two very specific options that a lot of my friends have done. There are multiple music groups on campus, and a lot of them deal with either specific kinds of music or a particular style of ensemble. So the one that comes to mind as far as for string instruments is Clark Sinfonia, which has, I believe, one concert per semester, and they're really dedicated to definitely symphonic style of music. But that's one very clear outlet. If you are a music major, you're able to get private lessons. That might even be a part of the major, but I'm not entirely sure. And you're also, of course, able to use the facilities we have in Estabrook Hall, which includes a variety of soundproof practice rooms. And another option that, of course, a lot of my friends end up doing is they play in the pit for the musicals. So the pit orchestra for Clark Musical Theater is almost entirely students, and a lot of them also play in Sinfonia or play in other bands on campus. But a lot of students like doing that as a kind of way to change up the style of what they're working with. But yeah, and if that particular kind of style of string playing isn't necessarily your exact interest, you can check out the Clark Music Society, which puts on a lot of events such as open mics or student concerts, and also a lot of bands at Clark form via expressing interest in that club. So if you want to check that out, you could also do that if you're interested in like jazz fiddle playing, as an example.
Thank you. Luke, I'm going to go back to you because this question is sort of related, and it's also kind of about music and theater. So someone asked if you could elaborate on the different plays or musicals that go on each year at Clark, and whether or not there are opportunities for voice lessons.
Yes. So there are opportunities for voice lessons. Again, similar to instrumental lessons, there are some technicalities, but if you are a music major, that is part of your major to take specific lessons. Now, when it comes to the performances throughout the year within theater, there are three organizations that are at play. Two are student run and one is the department itself. So you have Clark University Players Society, Clark Musical Theater, as well as the theater department. And I guess it's kind of like a half category. There's also the improv groups. There are three improv groups on Clark's campus: Shenanigans, Peapod Squad, and Amateur Hour. Peapod and Shenanigans do shows more or less monthly, but those groups are very small and are also audition based. But they are a big part of theater on campus. As far as the productions themselves, each organization tends to put on one production per semester, with the exception of when the department, the theater department, teams up with one of the organizations. So one example of that was my first year. The theater department decided to collaborate with Clark Musical Theater to put on a production of Avenue Q. This collaboration allowed for Clark Musical Theater to use our black box theater, as well as gain a lot more resources as far as costumes and lighting from the theater department. But yes, another collaboration between the theater department and Clark University Players Society is Playfest, as I mentioned previously. But that is more or less the general rule that that each organization does its own production, and sometimes another theater professor will put on their own production. And I've mentioned before, I'm currently in the Clark University Players Society production of Macbeth. Clark Musical Theater is currently doing a completely virtual production of Beauty and the Beast. That is their large musical, so everyone that auditions gets in. In the spring semester, they do a small musical where there are cuts, and it's a much smaller cast. However, anyone that doesn't make it into that can instead do the cabaret, which is a kind of scenic performance that everyone gets a chance to participate in if they so desire. And then the theater department is also doing some particular project. I think they're still working out the exact details, but that's going to be happening later on this semester.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, what sort of clubs are there for LGBTQ plus students?
I can take that one. So this is a student population that many of our students identify with. And the students who are interested in improving support and awareness for this community, creating social opportunities, that want to connect with other people in this population, many students decide to join our club Prism. This is for LGBTQ plus IA and trans students of color specifically, and many of our clubs partner with Prism with any of their events that they're doing. These students are really active in the community with having social programming. Some of the events are, I have to remember now that from throughout the year. During the spring semester specifically, they typically hold gay prom. I know tonight they have a Jackbox online, like a Prism game night Jackbox. I know that there is a hike coming up in a couple of weeks, and so this club really tries to promote community online, in the community, as well as just connecting to one another.
Also, I just wanted to point out that there is a new group on campus. It's an affinity space that's called QTSOC, and that's Queer and Trans Students of Color, which is located at Dana Commons. And then there's a group called Umbrella that also has a similar focus to Prism. But QTSOC is a new affinity group that isn't technically a club, but
So I just want to clarify, Kate, that Umbrella is an open combined, and its Prism is both of those clubs together. I think you're muted.
So for Kate and for Luke, could you talk about, do you find that clubs and organizations are the only way to make friends at Clark, or kind of what are some other ways that you kind of build your social network on campus?
Clubs and organizations are an excellent way to make friends and form bonds, but they're most certainly not the only way. I will say almost one way that's kind of tangential to the clubs and organizations themselves is the events that they hold. Kind of just bounce off of the question about Prism, just because these clubs exist does not necessarily mean, especially the ones that have to do with a particular identity, it does not mean you have to join them. You can also decide to go to their events if you identify with that community, or if you're interested in that community. And that's definitely the case for a lot of clubs. They have events that are specifically for the rest of the student body. like salsa does a lot of events with workshops where they teach other students how to Latin social dance, such as salsa, bachata, merengue, and you can meet other people that way. There are also residence hall events put on by resident advisors. So that's another way to meet other people. But I will say that in my experience, a lot of my friends that I've not made through clubs and organizations, I've made through just similar interests academically. Clark is a very collaborative academic culture, which means a lot of, you know, just stopping somebody who happens to be in your class in the library and asking what they got on the homework and like what they think about this particular reading. And a lot of friends that I currently have are in my same major of psychology because they share a lot of my same interests in studying how the human mind works and how it interacts with society. So that's definitely one clear way. But another way too is Worcester is a very fun place to be, and it's a fun place to go around and explore. There is the Worcester Consortium, which is 11 schools in the surrounding area. So if you want to make friends at those other universities, you can. But there are also other events and festivals being held throughout the entire year in Worcester that are also great places both to explore your interests as well as meet new people.
Yeah, I would say the same that Luke said. I think that the events are really fun. When you go to class and you meet students that sit next to you and you hear what they're involved in, it's really fun to be able to go to one of their events and support them and kind of build a friendship through that. So whenever I get to class on the first day, I always try and make friends with the people sitting next to me, and then also use that as another outlet. Especially if you have class from 12 to 1:15, it's always great to ask someone to catch up for lunch after class or something like that. So clubs and events is huge, but as Luke said, events happening in your residence halls are also great. And then the connections that you can make through labs and different study groups that you have in class is also pretty awesome.
Thank you. I think this question is definitely important. So do you have any pointers for balancing a busy schedule in which you have a double major or a major and a minor and are super involved in extracurricular clubs? So Kate and Luke, how do you kind of balance your time between academics and being involved on campus?
Yeah, I think, Luke, I bet you probably get this a lot too, but a lot of people think I'm a little crazy with how much I do. But I really like a busy schedule because it helps me structure my time better. One of my best pointers for studying is to find 2 different locations in the library that you really like. One of them is the space that you do your work by yourself and you get it done and you just get through the homework. And then another space where you can have more collaborative work and have more leisurely time to do it. But making those 2 distinctions has been super, making sure that my work is done on time because I know when I need to seriously focus on something and when I can do more of that group work and get it done at a different pace. But I think sitting down at the beginning of the semester and looking at your schedule and recognizing the free time, and if you have an hour and a half between 2 classes, like going to the library and using that time well, and just being aware of all those little times and spaces in between things, I think has been super helpful during a busy semester. But it all works itself out. I always say the underestimated days for studying and doing homework Friday and Saturday. So everyone really loves it being the weekend and relaxing, but if you do, it's always a great time to use those days.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as Kate. A lot of people I know are like, how do you do all of this? And I guess what my main answer is, I really like all of the clubs and organizations that I'm currently in. And I also take breaks from some clubs certain semesters. So an example of that is, since this semester I am co-captain of salsa, and I'm also in a theater production, I decided to not do chamber choir. Even though I really love singing, being a co-captain and being in a production are two very, very clear commitments that that I knew would take up a lot of my time. So I decided if I'm going to do my best in these two other areas, then I'm going to take a break from this other commitment. There's always another semester to do something, so it's totally fine to take a break, decide not to do that theater production this semester, or something like that. But I will say that being in leadership positions in clubs is very rewarding. It's just very important to recognize when you really are capable of being able to completely fulfill that leadership position, and sometimes that does mean taking some things off of your plate. I also, every Saturday morning, the first thing I do when I get up is write in my planner the entire week to come, every single event that I have to do, every single meeting I have to lead, every single homework assignment, both when it's due and when I will do it. And that has been an immense help in making sure that everything is timed well.
Sorry, Luke, you just reminded me of something that I wanted to say. It's also a really great resource to use those leaders that are part of your clubs and organizations as help of how to balance it, because they've been an underclassman and they understand what it's like coming into college and not really knowing what to do. So I think that, for example, a lot of students in Model UN have come up to me and are stressed about how to fit everything in and how to balance Model UN with their other commitments. And so this week we're having a balancing workshop where I'm sitting down with all those students and we're basically figuring out how they can structure their time. So going up to those leaders, they have a lot of knowledge on how to, or they assume that they do. Sometimes they still get stressed, don't worry, but they're also really great resources.
Awesome, thank you both. We haven't talked much about sports, so I'm going to ask a question about sports. So there's someone wants to know how much of a commitment are club sports? So maybe in your answer, if you could just sort of briefly talk a little bit about the different types of sports that we have, the varsity club and intramural sports, and then talk about kind of what the differences are and what the time commitment would look like for specifically for club sports.
I can talk a little bit about club sports. I don't necessarily feel like I can talk about varsity sports with a ton of knowledge, but club sports are a unique group of clubs that are partly in student leadership and programming and partly in athletics. So really they get support from me as the director of campus life, and they have a dedicated staff member who supports them through athletics. And we have roughly, I was just counting as you asked that question, Nicole. We have roughly, I would say 9 to 10 club sports currently. They range from tennis, track, ice hockey, equestrian, basketball, soccer, volleyball. We have the Clark University Sailing Club, as well as one that is really unique is Quidditch. And what makes club sports a club sport and not a hobby-based club is that they compete with other schools who also have that club sport. And so it is not a varsity sport, but they do have competitions throughout New England, I would say, with other universities. Depending on what sport you are a part of, that will kind of determine what the time commitment is. But I also know that the leaders of these club sports are very adamant you're a student first, right? And so if you need to take a little bit of a break, if you need to take a weekend off, that is no big deal. It is a club. It is not a varsity sport. And so there's a more flexibility there.
Also talking to just varsity sports, I would say depending on what sport you're looking at, it's really easy to walk on. The level of commitment definitely depends on the sport. But I know there's a lot of new kids that try out rowing, for example, and really, really like it. Our coach is very flexible, and he gives us a 3-week trial at the beginning of the semester to see if it's going to work with our schedule. So if you are looking for that extra step and going to that varsity level, feel free to just reach out to the coaches and see their approach to that. But yeah, totally look into sports and look into rowing, because rowing is awesome.
Great, thank you. There was one question, I just lost it. I think this is a great question. How often do clubs collaborate with each other? So how often do you see kind of cross collaboration between different clubs on campus?
Well, oh, sorry, Ali, I didn't realize you were muted. Okay.
No, I was gonna wait for you to go.
Okay. Well, one example that just comes to mind very freely is, well, the short answer is clubs collaborate very frequently. It's very often that there are shared interests among clubs, and especially if a club wants to get out of its comfort zone a bit, they will reach out to another club that overlaps with them a little bit, but does something very, very different, and say, hey, you want to do this sort of event. So one example of this is Salsa Encendida and the Latin American Student Organization every year collaborate on an event called Noche Latina, which is hosted in November of every year. And LASSO takes care of a lot of the event planning of ordering the food and decorating the space, but then the entertainment is provided by the Salsa Club. And depending on exactly how the event is scheduled each year, sometimes it's just a bunch of performances spread out throughout the evening. Other times there's a performance as well as a workshop that goes on. But LASSO reached out to Salsa saying, hey, we're putting on this cultural event and we know that you dance salsa, which is a really big part of Latino culture. Can you perform for our event? And that has been the case for multiple years. But it's very, very common for clubs to collaborate.
I think it's important to note also, so they collaborate on events and they collaborate on ideas, and a lot of the clubs have each other's back. If a club reaches out and asks a question or needs support or would just like to have another club help advertise, you see that very often on social media and on Instagram. Currently, there are a few clubs, BSU specifically, that are advocating for themselves, and you see so many clubs supporting them and advocating for them as well. And it is a really neat community, I think, that we have at Clark, that there is a sense of community, a sense of connection. Doesn't matter if the club is drastically different than any identity that you hold. There's a sense of connection and community among people who are involved in any club on campus.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. I think whenever we talk about Clark, we talk about the community at Clark, but I always like to say Clark students are also like very collaborative. I don't feel like they are competitive either academically or with their clubs or things like that. I think students like genuinely want to support each other. So you'll definitely see a lot of collaboration and support for each other's clubs. One question I do want to address is just about commuters getting involved in campus. So maybe Ali, if you could talk a little bit about how commuters can get involved, and is it any more difficult for commuters to join clubs or to kind of make friends and feel involved on campus?
Yeah, this is actually a really common question. I help run orientation, and we get this question often. Sorry, long day. We get this question often, and we tell students that commuters don't live on campus, but they are part of our on-campus community and part of campus life. A lot of students don't live on campus, and that's okay, right? A first-year student may be commuting from their family's home in Worcester or nearby, whereas another student is commuting from 2 miles away. And so it's important to note that there are many commuters. Not everybody calls themselves a commuter, though, and you will still be able to make friends. There currently, our first-year students go through a Clark Navigator program for their first-year experience, and so all first-year students have that. And a lot of clubs meet at different times, I guess, throughout the week. And so if you are not able to make a meeting time and you really want to be involved in a club, I know that the club leaders will still accommodate. Maybe they won't have their general meeting at that time, but they will accommodate you so that you can be involved in that club. And so it's just important to know that you will make friends and there are a lot of other students who are in your boat. And just because you don't live on campus doesn't mean you're not a part of our campus community.
Great, thank you. So we are running a little bit low on time. I do want to ask one last question. So for Kate and Luke, can you talk about maybe the one club or one organization that's had the greatest impact on you since you've been at Clark?
I can start. So I've already mentioned them many times, but for me, it's definitely Salsa and Sandita. When I got to Clark, I did not think that I was going to, that dance would be like my main thing. I'd only kind of done it on and off sometimes, in musical theater productions as an example. But I was really interested and I auditioned and I got in. The team was very welcoming and they told me that they were, of course, impressed with my audition, but of course that I would have to learn the dance, but they were very, very supportive. And I fell in love with salsa and with the team. And as a result, I am very, very happy with committing a lot of my time to being co-captain and helping run practices, put together performances, bring in external instructors. But I really like doing it, and I've made a lot of friends through the club, and I'm excited to keep doing it over the next 2 years.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. It's a hard question because I feel like all of the clubs that I've been a part of have had an impact and have made me grow as a person. I would say Latin American Student Organization has been a fantastic outlet for me. It's been a really great space to learn about a different culture than my own. And I was able to be on the e-board and I was the events planner for the event Luke was talking about. So I had a really, really great time in that club and I am continuing to have a great time in that club. But I would say, as I've talked about a lot, Model UN does take up a lot of my time because I am a co-president now, but I think one of the best things and one of the biggest impacts on my life so far has been being able to lead students and see them grow throughout the semester and see them become such good delegates has been really awesome and really eye-opening to me that I've been able to share my knowledge of I guess I'm now in my 6th year of doing Model UN. So it's been really fun to be able to balance laughter and debates and arguing and everything in between with those students and kind of build a foundation for future years.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. And thank all three of you, Luke, Allie, and Kate, for taking the time tonight to answer questions about clubs and organizations and getting involved in leadership at Clark. We enjoyed answering your questions. If you have any others, if we didn't get to your question tonight, feel free to email us at admissions@clarku.edu. We'd be happy to get back to you with anything else that we can answer for you or talk about. We have a number of other Clarktoberfest webinars happening the rest of this month, so definitely check those out. If you do 3 of them and have a domestic address, we'll send you a free t-shirt. So definitely some incentive to continue tuning in and learning more about Clark. We've got a lot of great sessions coming up through the rest of the month of October where you can hear about all different aspects of life at Clark. So thank you again, and we hope to see you on another Oktoberfest webinar soon. Have a good night, everyone.